Welcome to our weekly Prize Picks show. It's where we predict Texas games, except there is no Texas game this week. So we're going to talk about the rest of the season, and then we'll talk about some of our favorite picks entries on Prize Picks, both on the NFL. Alex has some thoughts on a game tonight, Thursday night. In addition, I've got some thoughts on college football games going into the weekend. Prize Picks is the sponsor of this video. They will 100% match your initial deposit. Use that live code OrangeBloods so that they know where you came from. Fellas, I was the only one that picked Oklahoma State last weekend, so I haven't pointed that out. Like I've been very low key.
Not about that. No victory laps for you just yet.
I don't victory lap when I pick against Texas, and then it actually happens. Nobody wants to hear that. However, because this is the actual pick show, I do need to mention that I did pick Oklahoma State last week. I wish I had been wrong. I wish we could be doing this show today, and you guys could be like, Catch, you've got the worst one-loss record on the Orange Blood staff after last week. That isn't the case. So now we look ahead for the final 4 weeks, and one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up is I wonder if we're all going to be picking the same games and the outcomes for the rest of the season. And does that mean because I have a one-game lead, is somebody going to have to do something crazy to try to catch me? Or did last week cement my place as potentially the regular season champion in the picks? Alex, I'll start with you. There's 4 games left. We literally did a modcast on Wednesday where we talked about the last 4 games. And these next 2, Kansas State and TCU, they're kind of tricky to call because I think you could make a case that the first 2 games that Texas will play, that they'll be the underdogs, like 65-35. And that when you look at the last 2 games against Baylor and Kansas, you might flip those numbers around and say Texas is a 65-35 favorite. So you tell me in your mind with 4 games left to play, how would you predict those final 4 games to go?
Man, so it's all right. So here's how they go. It goes at Kansas State on November 5th versus TCU on November 12th, at Kansas on November 19th, and then a short turnaround to a Friday game at home versus Baylor. So those are the remaining 4. And Catch, I mean, if they're not gonna start out this critical post-bye 4-game stretch with 2 losses, they're gonna either need to basically do something that they've only done once since Steve Sarkisian has been here, which is get a true road win, or they're going to need to beat a TCU team that looks to pretty much outclass them in a whole lot of departments so far this season. You know, a team that's looked like they've had consistently good coaching, they've had consistently good quarterback play. TCU seems like they're on it right now. I mean, they seem like they're on it. They seem like they're a good, solid, fundamental football team. So right out of the gate, that's 2 that I think getting 1 out of those 2 would be a outcome that, you know, Texas fans could probably live with. I said in the modcast, I think for Texas to be able to be a team that sort of exceeds expectations this year, they're going to need to win out. I don't think that they will win out. I think they'll lose at least one of these 2 games. I think.
Yeah, but how are you going to pick them?
I'm trying to talk it through. I'm just making this is the first time I thought of it. This is the first time so this is me just thinking it. I think I'm going to pick them to. Can I even pick them to win versus Kansas State at Kansas State?
I can.
I mean, by then, are we going to know about Ryan Watts? Look, it's just a few things still up in the air. I think they might lose to Kansas State. I think they might lose to TCU. And then but see, after that, they got to go back at Kansas. That's Jalen Daniels going to be back, you know, maybe with some of the magic we saw to start the season. I'd say they're going to, but I don't want them to pick. I don't want to pick them to lose 3 more and then just beat Baylor. Because I think they'll probably go 2-2. So I'm going to say they go to Kansas State and win. They come back home to TCU, have a miserable loss. They go to Kansas and they lose. They come back and they win to end the season versus Baylor.
Wow. Onward, that's if that's how he would pick the games today, that actually is a little different than I would probably go. What about you?
Yeah, so I would go. I see them splitting, so I'm going to go loss to Kansas State, loss to TCU, win on the road. I believe an ugly game versus Kansas, and then win to close out the season versus Baylor at home. So I would have them finishing 7-5.
Anwar, I'm exactly with you. If you ask me right now how I would pick what I'm projecting to be my picks for future prize pick videos over the course of the rest of the month, I can't pick them at this point. I mean, let me see what the quarterback situation. I leave my Kansas State pick potentially to be changed if I know that Kansas State's going to play like their 9th string quarterback.
I leave all my picks with potentially be changed.
Absolutely, but this one specifically, I'm at this point, I would say there's no way if I thought Adrian Martinez, not because I think Adrian Martinez is great, but if Kansas State is close to whole and they're desperate and they need to win that game to stay in Big 12 championship contention, and they've got a big game this weekend against Oklahoma State that could really dictate just what's going to be left of Kansas State when Texas plays them. But right now, I foresee myself picking Kansas State to beat Texas. I don't trust Texas on the road. I think at this point, I would likely pick TCU to beat Texas. Although by the time we get to that game, Texas at home is such a different team than them on the road that I'll at least give some consideration to picking them to beat TCU. But I do think TCU is a much better team right now, getting much better quarterback play. And TCU could be in a position where they could be absolutely dialed into that game for their own Big 12 championship game hopes. I absolutely will pick Texas to beat Kansas at this point. Although Jalen Daniels, as Alex mentioned, if he returns in time for that game could get real squirrely, as we saw a year ago. And then I do think Texas beats Baylor at home. Yeah, this thing's pretty wide with all of us. I don't have the regular season championship locked up yet. There's enough wiggle room, and we could all go in different directions based on how this thing goes, that it's not completely locked up.
Based on your scenario, Catch, it would mean that would mean that Texas has within this season a 4-game losing streak that we're in the middle of right now.
Well, it's only one. They beat Iowa State, but they weren't great. They lost to Oklahoma State.
Oh, my bad.
And there's a very real chance.
So it's 1 plus only 2.
Yeah.
So 3-game streak.
The scary thing is that in 3 weeks they could be 5-5 legitimately, and Rome will be burning at that point. And
5-5. Oh, I see what you're saying. All right, so you're saying that you're picking them to lose the next two, and then win out. Now, I'm leaving open the possibility that I might flip my pick there, but I'm just saying realistically, they could be staring at 5-5, and I might be predicting that. That might be the way I'm predicting it to go, only to win the last 2 games and end up 7-5. And then at that point, that's a must-win bowl game because you can't end this season 7-6. That looks ugly. Yeah. Whereas 8-5 isn't awesome, but it's a hell of a lot. But it's weirdly a hell of a lot better than 7-6. I mentioned that I picked the Oklahoma State game correctly last week. Anwar spiked the ball in my face with regards to picks. On PrizePicks, he hit $100 flex pay or play where he went 5 for 5 and won a cool $1,000.
Say it again.
A cool $1,000. And what's amazing about it is that he leaned in heavily to the Longhorn picks that we talked about all week when we talked about in our last PrizePicks video. And we talked about the plays in burnt orange that we liked the most. Anwar just leaned into it. He was like, you know what? All of that sounds pretty good and sounds about right. He threw in one little Frank Harris entry, and the next thing you know, his account where they have what I love about it is it's constantly displayed what your credit is. Like Anwar is just doing good. Like I know that had to feel good, Anwar.
Talk about living your best life.
Oh,
It was great. And listen, everything I picked up a couple of things. It was from our conversation here. And then Alex made this really great point that I had never heard because you were talking about one of the things that Ketch was putting in. And essentially, you were talking about basically you go all chips in on the winner, right, Alex? I don't know the terminology that you use for that, but essentially
you correlate your plays.
Say that again.
You correlate your plays. You had Quinn to go over with the passing yards. They got to go to receiving yards to somebody else. So it's like if he goes big, other guys are going big. It's like you don't got to hit on as many entries. It's like
and all he needed to do at that point was put one pick in there that wasn't one entry that wasn't Texas related. And that was good old Frank Harris at UTSA.
Correct.
Who we have
something safe like rushing yards versus North Texas.
Yes.
Like, of course he can bust one for 2 runs against North Texas. He should be able to get 60 yards. So it was like 30, I think it was 30 something. And it ended up being that. So yeah, I think it was let me look at it. 31. And he finished with 75. So yeah, it ended up being
that
great.
Dude, that was one that you were done sweating at halftime, probably.
He was like, before the game was over, he was showing that in the slide channel.
Jatavian didn't really take off. Jatavian's like the only person I was really waiting on, and everybody else was kind of all the horses been in. Because it really took about the fourth quarter, really those last couple of drives when it became obvious passing drives. Kind of like in fantasy football, Alex, when you got a guy who's trailing and you're like, all right, well, thank God I got to pass the ball now. And it just so happened that, it happened to hit. So, yes, thank you, PrizePicks. It does work. It does work. This is not something that we're just spitting out and a paid, partnership. We actually participate and we have fun with it. And we win just like you do.
I want to win just like you did.
No, I do too.
I'm like, there's that whenever one of your friends does really good in something, there's a part of you that's always like really happy for them. But then there's also a part of you that's like, oh man, why can't that be me? I found myself Anwar really like 95% being happy for you.
Yeah.
And only 5% like, oh, why can't I hit but the thing is, I haven't done $100 flex play.
Yeah,
you went big
really
and you hit. Like I can't even be mad at that. I've been nickel and diming these $20 and $40 bets. You can't make $1,000 if you only bet 40.
Hey, just a couple of things, Ketch. You had again. I was listening. I don't know. I just paid attention because you talked about winning about 400 the previous week. And to your point, I was like, I want to win $400. So a couple of days later, a day later, I was like, let me see. So I looked and see like how much could I put in, because I was looking like, okay, if especially with their flex plays, because I was thinking to myself, okay, if I get 3 of the 5, like what could I get, right? And then so I saw the 3 of the 5, and the payout would have been 3 of the 5 would have been like 40, 4 of 5 would have been 200, and 5 of 5 was, the 1,000. So I thought to myself, well, at least if I get 4, that would be pretty good. It just so happens, yeah. You gotta, and I'll be honest, I didn't have a ton left in my account anyway, so I was just like yellow.
The problem is that for me is they're almost certainly going to get all of that money back because. Now that I've seen you do this, I'm absolutely going to run some $100 flex plays. And, there's no guarantee that 5 of 5, there's no guarantee of that. If there were, it'd be a completely different game that we would be playing. But yeah, no, you've literally talked me into The next time Texas plays, there's no doubt in my mind I'm playing the $100 flex because I'm going for $1,000 because just like you wanted 400 last week, I now want 1,000.
So now I'll drop 200 and see what I can
get. Oh man, you got the money to do it. Yeah, you do.
We're cashing that out at the end of the year, baby.
All right, let's talk about our favorite picks for this week. Alex, I'm going to let you start on Thursday night in the NFL and any entries from the weekend and the NFL side of things that you like, because you mentioned that before we came on.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing that kind of stood out to me here was Gus Edwards, the Gus bus. He came back last week to the J.K. Dobbins-less Ravens running attack, and I believe he had let me pull up my snap count tool over at Roster Watch. Okay, so he last week he had one target, 16 touches for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's what people are going to remember, but that was only on 36% of snaps when he was coming back from the ACL injury. So you got to figure that this week he's going to be, I mean, come on, dude. I mean, you are choreographing that you're handing the ball off to the Gus bus. If he's only on 36% of snaps and you hand it to him 16 times, he's going to have to play more than that this week, because Kenyon Drake last week played 27% of snaps and looked completely dusted. He looked really good the week before, but Kenyon Drake at this point just looks really bad. They also had Justice Hill in for 31% of snaps. So if Gus Edwards just gets a small uptick in snaps but gets similar volume, I mean, he had 66 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. This is the same Tampa Bay defense that I know. I mean, I'm looking at the matchup tool right now. It ranks as a bottom 10 matchup on the week for opposing running backs. But I look at last week. Did you guys see what Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard were able to do for the Panthers against this defense? So, I mean, that's to me, I like the over on 48.5 rushing yards for Gus Edwards. Yeah, I'm sorry. The more on 48.5 rushing yards for him. And then the one that I looked at, another just rushing yards one, and another similar thing, just an injury kind of situation here, is Ezekiel Elliott versus Chicago on Sunday. He has a more or less of 65.5 yards. I mean, people forget just because he came back in and like hurdled a human being like right afterwards, but Zeke left that game with an injury last week. And although he was looking good, look, man, Zeke is still working with trainers at practice. He's still missing practice time. They're still gearing up Tony Pollard like he's going to be in an expanded role. But I do think Zeke will play, right? And so this line, this more or less that they've set at 65.5, I think that for Zeke Elliott is something. I mean, just if we looked at last week, it was kind of one of Zeke's better weeks of the whole season, as far as the way that he's looked and everything like that. I feel like they're baking that in. There's a little bit of recency to it for sure. Because last week, Zeke Elliott on 49% of snaps had 57 yards and he had the 2 touchdowns. People are going to remember the 2 touchdowns and say Zeke played well last week, but he is banged up. He's not practicing. They're gearing up for more Tony Pollard. So I like the less on Zeke Elliott. I'm not going to fall for the old banana in the tailpipe there with him.
Just for the record, I went less on Zeke a few weeks ago, and it cost me my 5 for 5 flex play that would have won me another $400, but that's neither here nor there. I have the jitters after thinking that a week ago, but I actually like all those, Alex. I'm probably going to at some point replay this video and go back in and steal all of your selections. Anwar, I've got a bunch of college football plays, entries that I love. Do you have any?
I got a couple. By the way, I hope no one thinks I'm an expert, because I don't want anyone to be like, what's Anwar saying now? Because I'm
Mr. $1,000 man.
He's money in the bank. And next thing you know, I want you to be cursing me out next week. So play at your own risk. Don't listen to nothing I say. Hey, but I got a question for Alex though before I get into like some of mine. Alex, they've got Brady at 280.5. my tendency, my initial reaction was I was going to take the less on that one. Then I looked up Brady's numbers, Alex, and he had 385 versus KC, 351 versus Atlanta, 290 versus Carolina, and he had 243 versus Pittsburgh. And even last week, as ugly as that game was against Green Bay, it was. Oh, I'm looking in reverse. The Green Bay game was 271. Carolina was 290 last week. I apologize. I'm looking in reverse. So 280.5, I feel like that's achievable for Brady. Am I being crazy on that one?
No, I don't think so. I would keep an eye on Mike Evans. He does have a questionable tag this week, and to me, if Mike Evans was in any way limited, that would make a big difference for me. But no, man, I mean, if you look at the Ravens this year, they've been banged up. They've been banged up defensively, and I'm just looking at the matchup tool right now that brings in all the statistics that are the most predictive and back tested, one of our most popular tools. And it has this as the 11th best matchup for opposing quarterbacks this week. The Baltimore game it's got a pretty decent 45.5 point total. Tampa Bay is actually 1.5 point underdogs in this game. So probably, I don't think that would necessarily lead to, a for sure passing game script. But here's the thing, dude. Leonard Fournette has been a very bad runner for the last few weeks. Mm-hmm. Have you guys noticed? I mean, they're getting
running
Rashad White in.
Dreadful.
Yeah, they're getting Rashad White in more often and stuff. That run game's broken. Tampa Bay is one of the teams with the highest pass rate over expectation over the course of this whole entire season. So I just, the number 11 matchup for opposing quarterbacks, the number 9 matchup for opposing wide receivers, and the number 9 matchup for opposing tight ends. So, we know that Cameron Brate's hurt, but we have seen the rookie Cade Otton step in and been playing reasonably well there at the tight end position and sort of being a funnel there for him. So I think that all those things put together, and also with the fact that, they're not going to move that entry and that more or less just because of how bad Brady's looked over the course of the last 2 games. If you could put blinders onto that stuff and just realize it's Brady and look at the numbers, I think it's fine to pick them more.
All right,
guys. Let me give you my 5-star entries for this weekend.
Look at me and Onward. We're getting our pens out.
I feel like I have turned into the betting guy that I used to interview on the radio all the time, where it's like, these are my 3-star selections, but for my 5-star selections, you have to pay like $99 on the website. I'm giving away all these for free. All right. I only love one passing entry in college football this week based on the early entries they have listed. They've got CJ Stroud listed at 300 yards against Penn State. Ohio State's going to murder Penn State. And I just think that CJ Stroud has been money all season long. He's defo throwing for 300 yards.
When is Brian Hartline going to get a head coaching job? Can you believe what they do with those wide receivers at Ohio State? Those quarterbacks are good, but those wide receivers sure make their job a little easier. It's been unbelievable what that guy's done.
So let me give you a few more selections, okay? Or entries, I should say. Spencer Sanders on the road at Kansas State, 50.5 rushing yards. Based on watching him last week, he's banged up. He wasn't looking to really get after it and run last week. I love the less on the rushing yards for Spencer Sanders on the road at K-State. If it was in the 30s, I would just stay away from it. Then it's at 50.5. That is not a tiny number. And then if he's sacked a couple of times, now you're asking him to potentially have to rush for 60 or 70 yards to hit that number. So I love the less on Spencer Sanders at 50.5. There's a couple of more rushes that I wanted to point out. And then there's one absolute surefire 5-star selection and the receiving that I'm going to point out here in a second. I love Blake Corum going over 115 in rushing yards against Michigan State. They are giving that dude the ball like 40 times a game. And now I think he's in the Heisman consideration. It would take, like, he could not do well on Saturday and I think still hit more than 115.5 based on his usage. He's turned into the running back. Like, they give him the ball like Texas fans wish Bijan Robinson got the ball. If you go to receiving yards, this one I think is absolutely loaded. This isn't a 5-star pick for me. It's more like a 4-star pick. But they've got Quentin Johnston for TCU on the road at West Virginia, listed at 78.5. Either
really?
TCU is going to kick their ass and he's going to break 78.5, or West Virginia is going to weirdly turn this thing into a shootout, at which point that gives him an even better chance of – and he had a slightly quiet game last week. I think he finished with 74 yards receiving-ish. Because I think I missed on Quentin Johnston last week. It was set at 75.5, and I think I missed it at 74. Like, it was closest I've had all season long. I'm not saying he's definitely going to go over or more like I did on those other picks, but I do like it. Here's the one I love more than any other pick. They've got Xavier Hutchinson at home against that wretched Oklahoma pass defense. We all saw Xavier Hutchinson catch like 10 passes against Texas just a couple of weeks ago.
When we all had the less of 8.5. I'm never going to forget that.
Exactly. This week, they've got Hutchinson at 99.5 receiving yards at home against Oklahoma. Oh, that is my 5-star all day, more. Hutchinson is going to have to break a leg in that game to not just torch that Oklahoma secondary that's been absolutely wretched all season long. And one more receiving that I like, that I'm looking at from the numbers, because I like Quentin Johnston to do well in that game. Oh, they took the guy out. There was the other TCU receiver, I swear, just a second ago that was listed, and now he's gone. Okay, never mind. That's fine. Let me give you one more that I like. They've got Deuce Vaughn at home against Oklahoma State at 115 rushing and receiving yards. I don't know that he gets the 100 rushing yards, but I like the more on the 115.5 rushing and receiving, knowing that they've got quarterback issues, and this may be the week that for Deuce Vaughn, he gets more usage than any time this season. I might even go look at the fantasy score for Deuce, because his problem all season long is that they've had Adrian Martinez be the red zone running threat. So Adrian Martinez has been stealing Deuce Vaughn's touchdowns in the red zone. That might not be the case this weekend. If Adrian Martinez doesn't play, they're going to lean on Deuce significantly. And let me see if real quick. And by the way, they've got Blake Corum's fantasy score at 20.5. More. I told you I love him breaking the 115 rushing yards. That dude's at least getting one touchdown. So,
by the way, Catch, they've got. Are you talking about Darius Davis from TCU?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's up here. They've got him at 45.5 receiving yards and a 10.5 fantasy score.
Well, I like the more on the 45.5 is what I was looking at.
I gotta ask though, man. Like, Anwar was about to load up with the $1,000 man picks, but then he just asked me the Brady question, and then you took over your picks. Catch. I want to hear the picks from the $1,000 man, Anwar Richardson.
But he used all of my picks.
Oh, so okay. Well, what are the?
Remember last week? I was like, I love Quinn to go over 300 yards.
Where's your $1,000?
I missed on. He put the right Frank Harris entry, and I used the wrong Frank Harris entry.
Okay.
I went with Frank Harris passing yards, and I think he went with Frank Harris rushing yards. That was the difference between him having the monster payday and me not so much.
We got to get a pick from Onwar, though, right?
He gave us some picks.
What?
I didn't give any picks yet.
I thought you did.
No, that's what I'm saying, man. $1,000 man.
Last one for me. Deuce Vaughn's fantasy score is 17.5.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
See, aren't you glad?
Oh, baby.
Did I mention that one?
I wasn't trying to cut you off, but that's good.
Okay,
like
Mr. $1,000. Give us your favorite entries of the weekend.
Okay, so I like going back to where you were talking about, but in a different realm. Spencer Sanders, they've got him at 250.5. I feel like that's easy for him, to be able to accomplish. Like I think that's light work. I think he can do that one in his sleep. I'm gonna go blast from the past. Okay. Casey Thompson at 240.5.
Oh, wow.
I think that's a low number because first of all, I just don't think Nebraska's that good. I think they're playing Illinois, another team that's like, So, at that point, give me Casey with the more on the 240.5 because I like that number. I like the Spencer Sanders number. I was looking at Dylan Gabriel catch at 260.5, with OU. And, I don't he's got to play against Iowa State. And I think that's a tough matchup for him. And I think it's going to be a close game, for them. I know typically you want to take the more in these instances. I'm going to take the less with Dylan Gabriel on that 260.5. A 260.5. I just don't. I think Iowa State's defense is good, and I don't think he's going to. I don't see a nearly 300-yard performance for Dylan Gabriel in that kind of game. That's kind of been. That's kind of been some of the ones that really stood out to me. And by the way, in basketball perspective, just throwing it out there, if you're ever on a weird night, the Lakers are bad, and LeBron usually has to score. So if you're ever on one of these weird Monday night, Tuesday nights, LeBron and AD, like especially AD with some rebounds and stuff like that, because everybody look. Whenever Russ Westbrook is in the game, take the rebounds for anyone Laker related, because he's going to miss like 15 shots. So you're going to get those rebounds. You just got to hope your guy gets it. But I'm just, some little words there. And Steph Curry's been nails, even though he was a little bit short for me on that. So my main one catch is probably the Spencer Sanders 250. That's probably my 4 or 5 star for me.
I love my 5-star picks so much that I've already entered in my $100 flex play for the weekend.
I was going to wait until Flex Friday, but now I'm worried that they'll change them.
Well, the Flex Fridays for games on Friday only.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So just for the record, my 5 picks for my $100 flex play, so that I go for Onwar's $1,000.
Yeah, baby.
I went more on the Deuce Vaughn 17.5 fantasy score.
Oh, baby. You can already count that one as good.
I went more on the Blake Curran 115.5 rushing yards. I went more on the Xavier Hutchinson 99.5 receiving yards. Mm-hmm. I went less on the 50.5 Spencer Sanders rushing yards. And I went more on CJ Stroud at $300 or $300 passing yards. I'm winning $1,000 this weekend.
Great
I am
job.
calling it right now. I'm going 5 for 5 on all 5 of those picks.
I love it.
Nice. All right. Love it.
I can't wait. to spend my $1,000.
That's gonna be great, dude.
You're gonna be in San Francisco just
Oh.
watching this thing on Saturday, just updating your app and just going, here it is, here it is, here it is.
Saturday, we're going to Alcatraz.
Nice.
And I'll be at
Oh,
Alcatraz. Like, I won't even need to check the scores.
Mhm.
I'm
cold
getting
right now.
those all right. All of them.
Hey, heads up, it's cold out there, so make sure you bring a jacket.
Absolutely. It's already packed.
Yeah, that Alcatraz, that is awesome, but it is cold as hell out on that island. So,
I watched Escape from Alcatraz last night just to get me ready for my trip to Alcatraz, which PrizePicks is going to pay for.
Mhm.
Thanks to PrizePicks again. Live code Orange Bloods, or use that code Orange Bloods to have them match 100% of your initial deposit up to $100. For myself, Anwar, Alex, clearly we're in trouble. We're way too confident. At least I am going into this weekend. We will talk to you guys next week. You guys be good. Later.